So I have the pleasure to welcome you to today's Infoshare on EOSC Readiness. So I'm Léonie Schäfer from BFN, and I'm part of the EOSC team within the GÉANT project. And today's Infoshare is the first of 3 EOSC info events organized by GÉANT. This Infoshare on EOSC Readiness is all about the EOSC Portal. The second event is the EOSC NREN coordination meeting, which will take place 2nd of June in the morning. And the third and up to now final event will focus on EOSC use cases and is scheduled to take place the 7th of July in the afternoon, just before summer break. Now back to this Infoshare of today on EOSC Readiness, which is, as I said, all about the portal. First on the agenda, we have Owen Appleton from EGI, who will then take over and talk about the onboarding process and provide you with further details about the EOSC Portal. And then we will hear about the approaches of our 3 regional projects, EOSC-Pillar, EOSC-Nordic, and NIFOS, and conclude the Infoshare with time for discussion, which opens the opportunity for you to have your say. I would like now to lead over to Owen Appleton, who is now here with the head of EOSC Future, and he will give you an overview of the portal and the onboarding process and how to actually handle it. Please, Owen.
Sure. Let me just start the slides. While you're doing that, I would just say that I agree with pretty much everything that was said. I agree with what Costas is saying, and also Annabelle, and I find your perspective interesting. I work for EGI, and we have some of the same federation challenges on our side as well. So we're not unfamiliar or unsensitive to what's going on, and we definitely need to find this way of representing all the people in the federation and really who's providing the service, while still showing that there is a connection there. And I think this is something we can do through these profiles. We'll get to that in a minute. So, welcome. I'm talking on behalf of EOSC Future. This isn't our logo for very long. Apparently, this is changing because it's too similar to other organizations, but this is what we have as of today. Within EOSC Future, I'm in charge of the onboarding task, and I kind of did the same thing for EOSC Hub, and I'm involved in it in EOSC Enhanced. So I show up like a bad penny, as we say in England, all over the place dealing with these issues. I've tried to create fresh slides for you, which try and explain things in a slightly different way. I know some of you are familiar with this landscape, but I wanted to make sure I covered it for people who weren't as well. So what covers a surprisingly large amount of slides is first, let's work out what EOSC is. Don't worry, we're not going too basic here. However, there are some things that I think we need to clarify. And ironically, I was just having this same discussion with Carol Lubin in a call directly before this one, who is the chair of the board of directors of the EOSC Association. So this is not a discussion that is just us having. So EOSC, right? There's some research domain, there's some EOSC domain. And obviously we have researchers who want to do things. What I think most of you will have heard of is that we have this thing called the EOSC Portal, which you can go to. It's there on the web. And behind it, there appear to be some range of resources and services and other resources. Costas makes a good point, which I should clarify. We say resource because we're trying to make sure that we cover eventually data sets, software, publications, things that aren't services. But I also have to be honest that right now, 98% of the work is on services, but this hopefully will change over the next couple of years to be more inclusive of other kinds of resource. And I think this is certainly somewhere we have to do some work. However, there is a kind of misapprehension here, which is that the portal, basically the website is EOSC, or that as a result, we're really just what I think most of us would call yellow pages, that this is simply some sort of listing of services you can access in Europe. And I don't think that's at least the whole truth. I think what EOSC is significantly more than that, or at least it should be significantly more than that. So yeah, we're not talking about this. What we're saying is that there is something beyond just a listing of services in EOSC, although that is how maybe researchers may see it from their point of view. However, I hope I can convince you that there is more going on. So what would be some slightly more complicated for you? So we still have some sort of portal, we still have some researchers, we've got some resources, some services. For a start, we have to make sure that we're acknowledging that the providers have a role in this, and that so you all represent federations in your own right at the national level and are service providers and have service providers under you in your different countries. These have to be in the picture. Also, we have to start looking at something beyond just a website. We have to look at basically a platform which is being created for EOSC, which sits under the surface. It's the rest of the iceberg under the tip, which is necessarily viewable to researchers. I would call this the EOSC Core platform, probably. EOSC Core is a terminology that comes out of the EOSC domain for the internal services which keep things running and keep everything harmonized and hopefully help us to add value through EOSC. This is stuff that is not really visible necessarily to the researcher side. They may benefit from it, they may use it, but it's not like we're selling it to them. This is the internal stuff, which I'm sure you're all familiar with because we all provide this for our federations internally. Probably most prominently here, there's a catalog. This should be a sort of a catalog of the services and other resources which are available. This is offered to providers through currently something which is either called the user component or the marketplace, or you can just call it the catalog, but there is some sort of structure in here which is within this EOSC Portal website. However, there's also an important tool on the other side. There is a provider portal, which certainly researchers won't perceive, which is a way for you as providers to interact with this catalog, to submit services to it, to pull services back out of it. And this can be via the web or via API. There are both options. There are also other core services within EOSC. One which I'll highlight, given I'm talking to people from GÉANT, is AI. This is clearly an area where you all have an incredibly prominent role and are frankly more advanced than a lot of the rest of us. And in fact, I know that the AI work within EOSC Future is all being led by GÉANT anyway. I also know that I think Christos Kanelopoulos is one of the co-chairs of the new task force on AI under the EOSC Association. I know that's kicked off already, so I think we can be confident that the AI work in EOSC should be fully compliant and compatible with the things that you're doing in GÉANT. At least I very much assume this is the goal. However, there are other core services as well. Ordering, this is something that's going to be made available through EOSC. Monitoring and accounting, and Kostas will have some things to say about this if I give him space, I'm sure, because he's intimately involved in this. Help desk, there's a bunch of other functions, some technical, some less technical. But I really want to point out here that we're talking about a platform rather than simply a website. The platform includes a catalog, but it's not the only thing that's there. So EOSC is a platform. If we go one level deeper, it's not just a platform where we can submit our resources, there are other things we can do as well. So if you're a provider, let's say Belnet, you have your services and various resources. Yes, you can submit them into some sort of EOSC catalog through the provider portal via API or via the web, but you have other options as well. I very much assume and hope that pretty much all the services coming from the GÉANT community, since GÉANT operates an AI federation, will in the end be connected to the EOSC AI Federation. This is definitely going to offer a lot of value from the researcher side, that they can use their existing credentials wherever they go, that you don't have the problem of trying to log into something and you don't have certain credentials, therefore you can't even get past the door. So I think AI integration is hopefully a given for most of us. Ordering integration, this is something which for some services may be really useful, for some it may not. You probably don't need ordering if you're providing open access services or ones that focus on a very specific community of people, but certainly you're going to be interested in things that require some ordering and configuration. And EOSC will be able to not only pass orders to you from researchers, but also collate orders with other services, such that in the end, a researcher should be able to essentially compose services to some level and order them jointly so that they are it's easier for them, but you still get the order with the data you need. Monitoring and accounting is going to be very relevant. We've already heard mention of virtual access. There are a bunch of projects where you only get paid if you can show usage, and I think increasingly we will have to show monitoring and accounting statistics to funding agencies to justify the money we get to provide services. So this is going to be of interest. Help desk integration may be of interest, may not be, but certainly being able to shift tickets around and reassign them between organizations in this larger EOSC landscape is potentially of interest. So there's basically a whole bunch more available than just a catalog. And this is what EOSC Future should be not creating, because pretty much all of this stuff exists in some form, but should be integrating, improving, evolving based on the feedback from you and others. And just to show you, don't panic, it's a complicated diagram. This is actually a diagram from the EOSC Future project, which was actually created right at the last minute. But this, I hope you can see, roughly looks the same as what we just saw here. You have, just use my laser pointer here, you have providers of resources at the bottom, you have customers, resource consumers at the top, there is a catalog in the middle, there is an onboarding process for it, there is integration for different core services. So I just wanted to show you that what I've been presenting directly reflects what it is that EOSC Future is trying to do. And also includes other things I didn't mention, like including AI and machine learning for discovery. I think this is PSNC who are leading this work, who I believe are a big part of your community. And obviously a whole load of work on procurement, which is directly based on what David did in the OCRA project. So you can see a lot of the work that the GÉANT community has been involved in around here. So last of these sort of diagrams, I hope, just to go one final level further, which is this really just one big platform or catalog that we are forced to use? And the answer hopefully is no. I don't see the EOSC portal as a unique point of entry for researchers in Europe, because I don't think the communities want that. I think the communities want to be able to benefit from EOSC, yet still have their own sovereignty, their own websites, their own portals, their own catalogs. So we need to think of a way to support that. And this is the direction we're definitely trying to go, because we see that there are definitely going to be community portals with their own platforms. These might be regional, so we have NIFOS here in EOSC-Pillar or EOSC-Nordic. They might be thematic, EOSC Life or Shock. They might also be the NRENs. I think NRENs are a good example of organizations that certainly within their country are going to have their own presence, but want to somehow connect with EOSC. And there's definitely going to be a way to connect records in catalogs and shift them between the central-ish or EOSC catalog and community catalogs. And we assume this is bidirectional. So we shouldn't have to onboard resources everywhere in Europe. You should ideally onboard once, and that should then be viewable everywhere, as long as you have agreed to that and the various catalogs have agreed to it. So I think this is something which is important to point out, and I'll get to why you still have a central portal in a minute. So here, the EOSC platform allows us to share records on services and other resources. Pardon me, there is one last diagram, which is just to say that beyond actually integrating at the catalog level, we can also integrate in terms of some of these other core services as well. So we see kind of platform level integration as possible, not only between the catalog, but the help desk. So rather than just with a provider, we can connect to the help desk of a whole other catalog. With ordering, with AI, of course, with monitoring and accounting. I mean, this is what we're choosing to do or seeking to do as EGI. We want our own marketplace, which we're currently in the process of evolving and upgrading, to essentially be directly compatible with what's going on at the EOSC level. And we certainly see this as a direction that a lot of the regional EOSC projects are going in. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to use the same data formats, although we think it's the easiest way. You could always interpret them or translate from whatever you're doing to the EOSC formats, but at least we see that there is benefit here for people who run their own community portals, as well as those who just directly go through the EOSC portal. And this really leads to a view which I very, very much subscribe to, which is that EOSC is a system of systems. It's not a monolithic or fully hierarchical structure. So if we have a researcher, yes, they can go to EOSC Portal, and we hope that they do, but they can also go to a regional portal. I mean, I've used EOSC-Pillar here as an example, but I think regional portals is to an extent what the NRENs are as well. You will all have a national identity, so this could as easily be one of the NRENs, or go to a thematic portal, which they may already do as part of their research, something like PANOS for photon and neutron science. And there are different benefits depending on where you go. I see that the central portal, the real value is actually not the portal part, it's not the website, it's the platform underneath it. The portal attached to that is good because it offers a hopefully pretty comprehensive registry of all the resources and providers available. Also, because it is a central space, this is where we're going to see experiments in composability of services, because we have some funding to do that through EOSC Future, and other perhaps value-add services or workflows across different providers that we can build. I also think that this is where we're going to see communities that don't already have their own very well-identified structure, their own portals, their own websites, their own catalogs. So you can consider this, in a way, it's a bit like Zenodo. It's both a really good consensus space, and it's also a space that can deal with orphan or small groups rather than replacing the portals that already exist for existing communities. If you want to go to a regional portal, I mean, you might find access to local language services, which are not going to be exposed in the same way in a central catalog. Also, access to nationally subsidized resources. I'm sure you all have these available, where they're available only for that country. It doesn't make much sense for them to be in EOSC as a whole, but definitely makes sense to be in a national portal. And similarly, we're going to go on the thematic level more into sort of deep ontologies, deep expertise in a particular area. But we expect these things to share data between them. And that should really be, for the researcher, kind of invisible, even though we know it's a lot of work, because that's how I think we can add value for them. So for the researchers, the idea is wherever they go, there should be some commonality. The AI should ideally be the same everywhere. We hope that the monitoring and accounting is increasingly shared across all of these different access points to EOSC, particularly to support virtual access. The same basic common good data sets are available, but that each path they might choose brings different value, and that they don't have to worry too much about where they go in the first instance, because there is coordination in the back end, which from their point of view, they don't have to worry about. For the providers and the communities, what we hope is that this means better access to resources. You can expose your resources to a wider group of people. It might be that you get through EOSC to users in your own country that simply weren't aware of what you were offering because they weren't going through a national portal. They were going straight to the photon and neutron portal, but now they see local services that they didn't know. Equally, bring in resources from other parts of Europe to your current user base. Enrich what you're offering by showing them the different options they have. And hopefully there is this idea to potentially use core components rather than separately deploying the same thing across Europe, or at least connect systems up. And to also share experiences and create some sort of community of practice. So to really understand how best to support research through drawing on the experience of all of us across Europe. So having tried to give you the pitch, what does the provider journey look like? For a provider, basically, you can go to this website and get started, and it's relatively self-service. There are other ways to do it, but things have massively improved since I started being involved in this, when you ended up being sent back and forth spreadsheets and things like that. So now you can go to providers.eoscportal.eu, you can register a provider, then you can register one or more resources, and after that, you can engage with the integration with some of these EOSC core services. But you can also go to your regular community portal or catalog and request that they connect to EOSC. This is something which we're starting now, having agreements between different catalogs. So you don't have to just go straight to EOSC. You can go via your regular channel, and hopefully that will be much easier for you if they're prepared to engage in the larger EOSC community. And if you are an owner of one of these catalogs, please engage now with EOSC Future on technical integration. We have effort available from our side to support this. It's a good time to do it because that effort is currently paid for by the EC. We don't know how long that'll be true, but it will be true for the next 30 months or so. If you want to go that way, it will be a case of doing some technical integration and making agreements on using common formats, common approaches to auditing and validation, sharing records on resources. And then there's more technical integration available if you're interested. If you want to see what that looks like sort of diagrammatically, this is something we put together last week for the launch of this task in EOSC Future. As a provider, we expect to see providers coming from our project partners, from the EOSC community, from some big use cases among the scientific communities, and from promotion by our engagement function. Providers will submit a record as a provider, and then subsequently as the individual resources, the services or other resources. These paths are somewhat parallel, I'll explain in a moment. This will then come to the EOSC Portal onboarding team, which currently is being run by a combination of EOSC Future, EOSC Enhance, and the Open Air Advanced project, previously included EOSC Hub and Info Central when they were running. This is a multi-project collaborative team to manage the onboarding process in a coherent way, rather than have it be many, many different paths. So we will have some record from you, which starts off under review. We will apply rules of participation or inclusion criteria that we get from EOSC. I'll mention that in a moment. And then we have the approved providers, and we have resources in our catalogs. There is also a kind of dependency here. You basically have to onboard the provider first, and then after you've done that, you can do the resources, but the two are in parallel, so I didn't want to show them totally separately. The rules that we get for this, these EOSC inclusion criteria, as I've labeled them, these are currently sort of project-based, but are right now starting to evolve based on input from the EOSC Association, based on their previous rules of participation, and a new EOSC Association Rules of Participation Task Force, which is the meeting I literally just left before this one. EOSC is going to take a more clear central role in providing some of these criteria than it did in the past, when it was basically left to the projects. And we're going to see the projects have to comply with this, but also have a voice in setting this up. And also agreements with the other catalog owners. So I expect that we will be making agreements as EOSC Future with NIFOS, with EOSC-Pillar, with GÉANT, perhaps with some of the NRENs directly, on having common inclusion criteria that we can apply fairly, so we have this onboard once, appear everywhere kind of model. And then once onboarding is concluded, once we have things that are approved, there is a function for flagging things for review if they're raised as problematic by a researcher, by a customer, or just periodically auditing records to make sure the records don't end up being old and outdated, representing services that don't exist anymore. But the other thing we will offer, apart from straight inclusion in the catalogue, is then after the onboarding into a catalogue, these options for further integration of ordering systems, of help desks, of the AI, monitoring, accounting, and other things. And this has a link to our own operations activity, since this has to be supported. But really, onboarding, being listed as a provider or submitting resources is the first step to allow the rest of this to happen. And certainly onboarding as a provider is pretty straightforward. The resources are a little bit more complicated. The way we do this is through these so-called EOSC profiles. This is a metadata schema, essentially, which came out of merging what came out of eInfoCentral and EOSC Hub and OpenAir. This has already been mentioned by Annabelle and Michelle. It's much, much better than it used to be. Yeah, I fully agree that it's far from perfect. I think it's still overcomplicated. And I think one thing that we'll have to do soon is sort of have a bit more of an architecture for it to make the required parts simple, yet still offer the option for complexity for those that want to use more complex functions within it. It's an open system. It's an open standard format. It's licensed under Creative Commons. It's used by EOSC Future, and it's either for use by others or for mapping of what you're doing to it. But this is what we're going to use as EOSC Future, as the sort of exchange format for listing providers and resources. You can see it here. It's linked on the provider documentation page from EOSC Portal. There is a short link here for both a PDF and an Excel file if you want to have a look at the current version. Trust me, look at the Excel file. The PDF is hugely long. The Excel file is much, much more readable. This will give you the best view of how it looks today. Also, please note how much of it is optional. The amount that's actually required is a fairly significant subset of what's there. So if that's the profiles, in a way, the profiles are the first stage in applying some rules of participation or inclusion criteria, because you've got to fill the profile in and you've got to fill in the required fields. But there are also some actual rules that go beyond this. There is a set that were generated by a rules of participation working group from EOSC under the previous structure of EOSC governance, which are great, but incredibly high level. I mean, EOSC is based on the principle of openness. I think we can all agree on this, but at the same time, I'm not entirely sure how I would check this in a really mechanical way for a particular provider or resource. So now we've already had to push beyond this to something a bit more kind of mechanistic. These are inclusion criteria for EOSC. These are the ones that were created by EOSC Hub. They need to be updated, to be honest, but they are being updated now based on a bunch of experience we have, including some of the regional projects, to try and have things that we can check in the onboarding and the validation and auditing of resources to see whether they actually do fit EOSC. Some of it is linguistic. I mean, right now we're only really checking things in English. This is something I hope we can change as we have more resources available. But these are the sort of considerations we have to have. How do we have data in a way that we can actually realistically and fairly check? So between these two, I think we have a little bit of a problem which we're now trying to solve. Up to now, we've had really only from EOSC rules at the very high level of principles, these sort of EOSC is open type ideas. And then from projects, like the ones I've been involved in, we've had these very specific procedures or checks, such as the ones applied by the EOSC Portal onboarding team, both through the EOSC profiles being filled in and the EOSC inclusion criteria. Now we're trying to essentially fill in like a middle layer between those two, the kind of criteria, requirements, rather than the specific procedures or the generic principles. And I think this is something that's really needed. And this is what this new association task force that kicked off last week is trying to form. And I know there will be a call for participation in this going out later in the year. So there will be an opportunity for people to have a voice in this for sure. And I think actually this represents kind of how are we going to do enforcement across EOSC. These principles really, we only do monitoring and enforcement at the level of EOSC as a whole, while the procedures, the specific checks, we do these at the level of a specific request from an organization or for a service. And probably what we're going to have to come up with is the checks at the level of a catalog. So we let catalogs, individual catalogs, perform checks as they choose, but they have to meet some criteria which are set somehow by EOSC. And I think this is the thing that's missing that we'll be creating soon. So, kind of just the last slide. What next? Hopefully this has been somewhat useful, and I'm about to time. Do you want to onboard? Fine, directly head straight to the website. But also, I think this is a discussion you have to have internally. Maybe some of this will be done via GÉANT. I mean, I understand your federation structure. I don't want to suggest going particularly either way, but I think definitely you're going to want to have a strategic discussion about the best way to include things in EOSC, of who does the work, of how do you acknowledge GÉANT and the NRENs, who gets highlighted, all these complicated issues which Michelle and Annabelle have been struggling with. But I think I can leave this to you to decide. Still, if you want to get started, the provider portal is there. And I think that if we go this route, one of the real benefits, whether you do this directly or as a group, is that we are going to start to harmonize services across EOSC, if nothing else by using these EOSC profiles, which ask for the same information about every service across Europe, and try and ask us to do new things. I mean, asking for privacy policies from a lot of organizations turns out to not be easy. They don't have them to hand. I imagine for the NRENs, this is something that you're much more aware of, but this is the kind of thing where we'll actually be raising the general level of maturity of services across EOSC by having a common set of questions we ask. For integration, I hope that AI is going to be a bit of a given. I hope this is a direction we'll really want to push in, but you should really definitely be aware of the opportunities for integration with other EOSC core services, especially during EOSC Future, when we have a pool of resources to offer to actually support you with effort from the people who made the core services, including Costas, for instance, whose organization will be funded to deliver this support through EOSC Future. For the rules, they really are evolving. I definitely encourage involvement in the evolution of the EOSC profiles. I think this is something which needs to be really better structured, how they're governed going forward. Do contact me if you want to be involved there. And for this rules of participation task force, look out for a call for participation later this year, which I'm sure your GÉANT colleagues will forward to the NRENs to make sure they get the opportunity to play a part in. And if we're being brutally honest, I left it just as the very last point. Sustainability, funding, mandates, why does Switch in Switzerland want to offer services to someone in the UK? Yeah, these are questions that aren't answered yet. For now, we have projects that pay for a lot of these services to be delivered, or we have organizations prepared to offer things basically for free as long as the usage isn't outrageous. But in the long term, this is the thing that has to be solved before the end of EOSC Future. What is really the kind of economic model, the sustainability model that underlies EOSC, that makes sure that the providers of services and other resources get reimbursed or compensated for what we hope will be greater use of their resources across Europe. So I didn't want to be, should we say, I don't want to end on a down note, because I think there are things we can do here, but this is certainly something which we can't pretend is already solved. And we certainly look for input from the community in working out how to go forward. So I'm to time, although we're a bit late. That's me. Get in contact if you would like any further help or go start onboarding. I'll stop sharing my slides in a moment, but I don't know if we want to do questions now or wait till after we've heard from the others.
Thank you, Owen, for this excellent presentation. There's already the first question from Chris. Do I unmute?
Everybody can read my
remark.
read.
So I came into this not at the start of what was going on in EOSC, or I wasn't involved in EOSC Pilot. I came in during EOSC Hub, and I've been trying to push the view that I presented today, and I've found that the feedback has been incredibly positive from the communities, from the research communities. They're much more interested in this than the monolithic, it's forced on you EOSC, which I just see no appetite for outside of, well, organizations a bit like mine in the past. But we have to accept people like EGI. We're not just going to be given money to give away what we like for free anymore. It's just not going to happen. I think this system of systems, this view is vastly more realistic. And I think the Commission seem to be much more convinced. And honestly, all the stakeholders I see are now open to, if not subscribing to this view. And I've tried to make sure it's built into the work I'm involved in the future. I don't know if Michelle or Annabelle want to comment on that as well, but I think this is more realistic, certainly.
Yeah, I'm happy to comment on that, Owen. I mean, from a stakeholder perspective, well, GÉANT, as soon as we heard the EC's view about this monolithic single portal, everybody goes to Amazon and gets everything they want. We started to put the Nino lights on and said, wait a minute, no, that's not how it works. I think the great thing about EOSC Future Project is, for the first time, it brings together the kind of what I call open science, the kind of FAIR folks together, plus the e-infrastructures, plus the thematic service providers. And of course, all the thematic service providers, I mean, if you even just take Elixir, for example, through the EOSC Life project, so all the RIs are working in that area, have got together in EOSC Life. They've had a portal for 20 years. Why would they suddenly come and use something else? Their users are very specialized. They're used to using that portal. Now, if that portal plus the one that maybe the photon neutron community, if that can be linked into EOSC Portal, and I think it's very good that you called it a platform, because that's kind of what it is, that's going to really work for the users. And if we look at what the EC want to get out of this, one of their key objectives is getting different disciplines to work more together and to share resources. So if you also look at what's coming down the line from a policy perspective from the EC, it's this concept of data lakes, right? So that all the data starts to, all the data in one scientific discipline starts to be in one place, and then you start forming these larger lakes that people can use and reuse, moving towards a reduction in fragmentation. And I think that's what we see here with the portal. So everything that I've been to, all the events I've been to, the stakeholders are much more bought into a plan of, we can keep our own portals, but they will all be linked together and work on a more federated model. Sorry, that was a long answer, but there you go.
It was,
Sarah.
if there's time, I was just going to chip in on that too.
Yeah.
Certainly, I think from like the governance perspective, from the former executive board and now the EOSC Association, we're really pushing this idea that EOSC is an environment. You know, it's this system of systems. It's not this monolithic one portal. I think there's still a lot of misconception in the community. And I think that's something that collectively we really need to work on. But from, you know, when you think about the end user perspective, people have have their services that they go to already, whether that's the NRENs, if they're institutions and they're plugged into this network, or if they're a researcher in a particular field, they have their disciplinary data centers, they have their services that they use. And we don't really want to change that user journey. We want to enhance it by giving them access to a broader range of services by connecting things up. So I think that's really what we really need to emphasize.
Yeah. So I think that, like I said, it's the EOSC platform should be something like a bus rather than a single entry. And I think you still will end up with something called EOSC Portal, because if you have this bus, you may as well have a viewer for it. There's no reason not to. And we also have to accept, like I said, not every community has a heavy structure available already. There are new communities which may want to use the portal, for whom it's really useful to have this. So we don't get rid of the portal from my point of view, but I think the emphasis needs to shift. And I really do want to stop. I'd be happier if we talked about the EOSC core platform and the portal as a viewer on it and a data source for people to go and find out about EOSC than thinking that the portal is EOSC. I think that's a bit of a risk. And the Commission have been confused about that as well. Reading the call, they're super unclear about the difference between the tech and the website, basically.
Yes, one more question in the chat from Sylvia. She asked about fair integration. Can you elaborate a bit on that?
Yeah, a little bit. So being fair is in the rules of participation, which are currently very, very high level. I think we have to move beyond that into something a bit more practical. This is a discussion I was just having. I was being educated by Karol Lubin, who clearly is a big proponent of this. That, you know, he says if it's not fair, it shouldn't be an EOSC, but then also says fair, it does not equal open. So I think there's some promotion to do here to clarify what it means to be fair. And I think fair integration or following fair principles is likely to be one of the barriers to entry of EOSC. And I personally am not against that. We just have to be super clear about what that actually means on a practical level, so that providers don't see this as something which excludes them. You know, Carol was already giving an example of like Bayer, the pharmaceutical firm, following fair principles, which I think is a good example of how, you know, a big private enterprise dealing with very privileged data can still consider this as an approach. But I think there's definitely a step to go to show what is it you have to do to show that you are fair. And maybe some of these rules will have to bring in over time or with a lag, so that we say we're bringing in this rule in 6 months' time or a year's time. So you need to be ready. Here's the resources you need to prepare. Here's what you're going to be checked against. Here's the direction we're going. I think this is probably the most realistic.
Yeah, and I maybe just chime in on that from the previous fair working group on the exec board, that I think, you know, there are lots of elements to the FAIR principles, but I think it's like a baseline level. What we picked out is, you know, having an identifier for the different objects, having metadata so you know what that object is, and making sure there's a license. So as Owen said, FAIR doesn't mean open, but we still need to know who can use those different objects and for what purpose. So I think that should really, in terms of our rules of participation, be the baseline for any digital objects we have within EOSC. But there are also recommendations that have come out around things like the FAIR metrics. And again, there we've taken a tiered approach. We've said, you know, the RDA working group had recommended a whole series of metrics, and we've looked at what is the baseline level that should be in place at the start, and how do we, you know, what should be in place by 2025, 2027 of EOSC. And I think we do need to phase things up, because we need to make sure that we don't exclude any communities, and that, you know, we're as inclusive as possible.
Yeah, I also think that Costas made a point earlier. A lot of the previous work on EOSC comes from organizations which are service oriented rather than so data oriented. So there is a bit of a clash that, how do I say how fair a service is? Because fair is mapped really to digital objects and has a cross application with services, but it's not necessarily a one-to-one. And I think that one of the things that is supposed to happen now is we're really supposed to draw data in more effectively to EOSC, which we didn't do so much in the last phase. This is definitely a goal for this next phase. And as part of that, we really have to build these FAIR principles into that as we go along. So I totally agree, Sarah.
Sorry, but I have to cut short this very interesting discussion, because we have 3 more presentations to come about the regional projects. So when I prepared this info share, I thought there's EOSC Portal, that's the one and only, but then in discussion with the regional projects, I learned, no, there's much more. Each regional project had its own approach, very interesting one. So we want to hear about it. And the first one to present is Dusan from Serbia, who is the work package leader responsible for practical EOSC onboarding activities in the NIFOS project. Dusan, the stage is yours.
Oh, so thank you. I hope that you can see my screen now. The presentation, yeah? Okay, so my name is Dusan Vudragovic. I'm from the Institute of Physics Belgrade, and within the NIFOS project, I'm responsible for practical onboarding of regional services to the EOSC. So NIFOS Europe project, like the other Infra 5B projects are started before 2 years, something like that, or a year and a half, and at that time, not so many onboarding related things were developed, and therefore we have started with development of some kind of the onboarding methodology, just to see what are unique things for all these regional resources that are available. And the primary purpose was to identify the main aspects of research description. So in order to identify these main aspects, we started to collect information about resources, also resource providers in our region, and we have collected something around 100 different resource description. And then after that, this initial information gathering step, we perform some kind of the analysis of the collected information, and we through this analysis we identified the 5 different aspects of research descriptions that are illustrated at this slide with these 5 circles on the left hand side. So in our analysis, I must say that we were focused only on generic services, so like computing services, data storage services, data management services, thematic services. So this is by researchers developed services, so discipline-specific services, and repositories. So all kinds of the repositories, publication repositories, datasets repositories, and software repositories. So for these kinds of resources, first we identify the minimal set of metadata that is common to all type of resources taken into consideration, and based on this, we produced general resource description template regardless of the type of the resource. And such general service description or resource description template somehow accumulates basic information, marketing information, and all these different things that already presented by Owen. And today it is fully compatible with the EOSC profile specification, but in our project it is a little bit extended with some, let's call it project specific information. So once we have covered all these generic aspects of resource description, we ended up with a list of the resource type specific metadata, and we have tried to organize these into dedicated templates for description for per research type. And somehow these were more technical properties, practically technical specification of the research. So I can say that this technical specification of the research we considered as another aspect of the research description template. So far there are 2, so generic and technical specification. And if you look these 2 aspects of description of the research of the resources, there are somehow non-EOSC related aspects. So practically any resource can use these templates to describe its purpose. Of course, more interesting for us were EOSC related aspects, so aspects that will somehow describe and estimate resource potential to be integrated with other resources. And these additional aspects we grouped into 3 major categories: so technology readiness level, EOSC integration level, and management integration level. Also, I would like to say that besides of these 5 main aspects during the onboarding process, we also consider scientific impact of particular research. So it is equally considered, and our aim is to identify and onboard resources relevant for the researchers at European scale. But also, meanwhile, besides scientific impact, we have also identified additional aspects such as I don't know, innovation potential, social impact, etc. But to perform assessment of resources from these points, we need to gather additional information such as recent bibliographic references, size of the community, number of registered patents, international collaboration, and this is somehow a little bit out of scope of the project. So we are primarily focused on these 5 aspects. So generic specification, technical specification, technology readiness level, EOSC integration level, and management integration level. So the first one is technology readiness level. So you are already familiar with this, and we use these levels to assess the research development stage. And as you know, there are in total 9. TRL oversees 9 different levels, and I guess from the onboarding perspective, only high-level TRLs are of interest. But anyhow, in our portfolio system, we will also collect and describe resources that are currently under development, because we think that EOSC somehow can influence the course of development, and therefore in this way, once the service research is registered within the catalog, we are able to track the progress of particular research and inform developers about new EOSC features and functionalities that could be somehow integrated within the research in the early research development stage. Then, inspired by TRLs, in order to be able to measure the research management development, we have put on the same scale, on the same equal footing, various perspectives of research management following FIT-FSM standard. So we have introduced 9 different levels that the research could reach in the integration with the project research management procedures and policies. And these levels are also illustrated here from MIL 1 to MIL 9. And at the end, following the same approach, we have identified the EOSC integration level. So here we have tried to organize these levels gradually based on integration complexity and necessity of particular integration. And since it is quite complex diagram, we have also developed some cumulative levels of integration. So we divided in low, medium, and high level. And the primary purpose of this is to somehow identify a minimal integration level that the research has to reach in order to be exposed through the NIFOS Europe catalog or EOSC catalog. So at the moment, I said already that we have divided into low, medium, and high levels. So at the moment, these minimal requirements that are, so these are some kind of the rules of participation that are developed by the project, include a fully generic and technical description of particular research. Then also we expect from each research fully developed relevant policies, such as terms of use, access policy, and privacy policy. And also we expect from each research that are incorporated into the catalog to be integrated at least with the project's help desk and monitoring system. And only when these requirements are satisfied, the research is exposed through the catalog. In the last, let's say, 6 months or a little bit more, we were focused on more on practical onboarding, and the central tool of the onboarding of our onboarding procedure is Agora catalog. So we use Agora to store all available information about providers and resources. So information entering is performed via web portal, mainly by NIFOS Europe onboarding team members in collaboration with resource providers. And the Agora system is developed by GRNet, so Kostas is in charge of this development, so he can answer on more if you have any more technical question. But beside of the Agora catalog, which is, as I said, central tool, we have also developed onboarding dashboard. This is platform that combines information stored within the Agora database and some additional project-specific information that are stored in the local database, and it gives project-specific view of the registered resources. So also onboarding dashboard somehow serves as Agora frontend, but also it highlights missing information per resource, so the resource providers could track the progress of the onboarding process per resource. Yeah. The dashboard, also the Agora, these tools have been recently developed, so we plan to add many additional features, but at the moment it lists onboarded and candidate resources and gives details information about resources stored within the catalog. Also, for some time, our Agora team, in collaboration with the EOSC team, works on integration of the Agora catalog with the central EOSC catalog. This integration will establish some kind of the trusted channel between these two catalogs, and once it is established, the resources and providers that are marked within the Agora as onboarded will automatically be published into the central EOSC portal, and practically the resource onboarded to the NIFOS Europe catalog. For resource onboarded to the NIFOS Europe catalog, we can say that it is practically also onboarded to the EOSC. Of course, this implies many technical and procedural requirements, but I think that all of them are somehow completely satisfied by our catalog, since the Agora strictly follows EOSC profiles specification, and this, as we already heard from Owen, the specification defines data models for EOSC objects, EOSC entities such as providers, resources, but also related taxonomies. Yeah, so somehow to conclude, with this approach, we tried to ensure the compatibility with the central EOSC catalog, but also since NIFOS Europe, since our project is partially research-oriented project, we open a channel and deploy the environment for project-specific development that allow us to test some EOSC profile extension and integration with new federation tools. So if you have any question, I'm here.
Sorry, so thank you very much for this presentation. I have to cut you short because we have another presenter who has to leave at 3:30. So that's Anders who will present EOSC-Nordic. So I would like to lead over directly to Anders.
Every channel. So I think I'm unmuted now, right?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. And then I'll just find the presentation, which I have. Where is it? There. And when we share the screen, it's that one. Right, so I take it you see my screen now? So it's integration and onboarding in EOSC-Nordic. So I'm team member of EOSC-Nordic. The team is led by Ilya Livingston of Estonia, and he could not be here today. So that's why I'm giving this presentation. Very short on EOSC-Nordic. We have 24 participants, all of the Nordic countries, and also we have representatives from Germany and the Netherlands, who are obviously not of the Nordic country. So we have a number of work packages within this effort, and the work package 3, as you see there in the greenish circle, concerns will have ties into the universities, libraries, and the infrastructure and service providers, and we are looking at onboarding and these types of things. Also, I see that Owen made the comments here that Ilya is heavily involved in the EOSC Future, which is absolutely true. He's also involved together with me in the Puhuri project, which aims at providing a portal for accessing the Lumi supercomputing, which is a Euro HPC computer being built in Finland, where also I think that Christos will feel familiar with the work that's been done there. So EOSC-Nordic's approach to EOS service publishing looks kind of like this. You have on the local level, local policies and motivation to open up, working on that, to get that through the national competence centers and the EOSC-Nordic support, aligning with the national policies and the processes on the national level, creating some sort of an automated export through EOSC-Nordic and NIC support, and adhering to the EOS rules of participation and the EOS sustainability to create sort of EOSC or whatever we want to publish in the EOS portal. So what is provided in the Nordics as is? Well, what we have currently, data analysis, data management, data storage, HPC, training, all of this is provided through NIC. And this here is actually a link, and I will show what that looks like when you come there. You would see this. So this is that same web page, the Nordic E-Infrastructure Services. Now, this is not the portal per se. This is a listing of what infrastructures are available in the Nordics, and it's not even certain that they are available across all the Nordic countries or even in Europe. But these are the ones that we have identified who would want to be published here. And this is not certain that all of these would be carried over to a EOSC portal. So why is that? We'll go back to the presentation here. If I can. What can be provided? Well, this is one of the reasons. All of the European resources, and I would dare say most of the resources within Europe, are mandated by some governing documents. If we take the Swedish case, proof of concept pilot, that's totally fine, that's okay. If you have something that is long-term commitments, that is, for instance, providing compute resources, that will likely not work because they cannot be provided in that way as it is today. Universities also usually cannot use resources without procurement. So then we come with that problem. If we have to make procurement to request resources for something, say HPC resources, who answers to calls for tenders in EOSC in that sense? We also have, oh, sorry, I skipped a number there. This question, this has been raised by Owen, who mentioned it in sustainability here. Because the problem is, and what I try to show in this diagram here is a three-dimensional seesaw, if you could imagine such a thing. All of these arms of this one have to balance. The cost on the provider side has to be equal on a cost on the user side. We can't have it lopsided. because we need to have full cost recovery. That's mandated, at least in Sweden and many of the other European Nordic countries. So we need to talk about cost recovery models. As Owen also mentioned, that's from a sustainability perspective, we need to do that. We also have VAT issues. Even if we say that we have a stakeholder who is providing HPC resources or data, and an organization who's consuming that, but also provides HPC resources and data, you would say that those costs would balance each other and we don't have a VAT issue. And you would be wrong, because that would constitute a bartering scheme between the two parties. And even bartering schemes within the European context is subject to VAT. This is something we learned in the Dellinger project, where I was partaking in, where we looked at resource sharing within cross borders within the Nordics. Then we have the problem of institutional trust in this sense. What entities do we trust are able to pay for resources? Let's say, for instance, you have a researcher in country A who consumes 1 billion core hours in country B, or have consumes a large data set. That incurs a cost. Is that person eligible to foot the bill for that? If we have, let's say, Joe Blogg's poultry and tire service, and he wants to use, what I know, let's say he wants to use an HPC resource, wants to have 1 million core hours, how do we know that he has the means to pay for that? That is something we need to solve. This can be solved in specific cases where it's, for example, in the Nordinet example, where you have a multi-state agreement where you can waiver these costs, but there have to be agreements on that. And again, it's all mandated by the governing documents. There's no way we can go around this. So then we come to this final slide. I'm sorry, I'm doing this very, very quickly. What does the A in fair imply? So from the GoFair A1.2 definition there, it doesn't equate with open or free, as Owen also already mentioned. And they clearly state that access conditions should be provided for how do you access these data or these resources or these services. Also that private and protected data can be fair. There's no argument about that. And the accessibility requirements must be machine actionable, otherwise how can we do this? And the owners and the contributors of data sets must be able to know who is accessing the resource and data. And also you have user-specific rights on what level this user can do this, but can't do that, whereas this user can do that, but not this. So what implications do we have from that then? Well, we need to know which data sets can be transported across borders. For example, in the example of Denmark, where you have the law doesn't prohibit you from moving data across borders, but you have a policy that says we don't do that because it's just too much of a hassle. That's perfectly fine. We can have that, but we need to know what data set we can transfer in that way. What resources are allowed to be shared across borders? We have export restrictions that can be by law or by contract. You have, for instance, the dual-use products of, say, large computing resources. They have export restrictions, and that is also controlled by, even if you are located within Europe, if you are a citizen of certain countries, they may be applied to you. We need to know that. Are data sets sensitive or unsensitive in all countries? Just because it's a data set that is not considered sensitive in Sweden, it might very well be that in some other country. We need to keep track of that. Aggregated data sets can actually constitute a sensitive data set. And this is something that we haven't looked at as far as I know. We had, a couple of months ago, there was a sentence on a group of people who have been using publicly available data in Sweden to create a superset of data which constituted a sensitive data set, i.e. it told everyone in the world where the sensitive military installations were. That is bad. How do we take care of that? I have no idea. We need some way to at least have a record of who accessed what data at what point in time. Then we come into problems with the fact that we live in a GDPR world. Can we handle that type of logs on who access data? I don't know. Maybe we can. Maybe we can't. Can we ensure the identities of the users when needed? Yes, with the framework that Christos is working on with the AI, we can probably ensure the identities of users. Then we run into problems of what are we allowed to know about users when they access certain data sets? That is something that we haven't looked at. And then we come to the institutional trust again. What entities do we trust with using resources? And that's basically what it boils down to. We need to have the institutional trust between these resources. If we do not have that, I fear that we will have a big problem. And I think that was my last slide.
Thank you very much, Anders. Very interesting presentation.
Yeah, I'm sorry for being a downer here, but let me stop the share.
It's good points for discussion later on. So we are running a bit late, so I hope to our audience you can stay a bit longer because we have one more presentation from Fulvio from GARR, and we still hope to have a discussion with you afterwards.
Yeah.
For example, on the topics you just raised, Anders.
Yeah, I shall have to leave, but I will try to come back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Anders.
Right.
Fulvio, are you ready to present?
Yes.
Okay.
Hello, I'm sharing my screen now. Okay. So thanks, Leo. Thanks a lot, Léonie and Magda, for inviting me today to talk about the EOSC-Pillar. So let me start with. Does it move? Yes. Let me start with this first slide in summarizing what the project is. We are 18 partners from 5 countries: Italy, France, Belgium, Germany, and Austria. And okay, these are the logos of the 18 collaborating partners. Okay, let's quickly go to the first slide. I thought it would be useful to provide some context before starting with the topic of today's meeting. First, let me state that the main objective of the project is not to onboard services to some kind of portal, but rather the focus of the project is to leverage national initiatives. Because we believe that national initiatives are the fundamental elements which allow us to build useful and inclusive, sustainable EOSC. With this in mind, what we aim to do is to harmonize procedures for the delivery of services across nations, to try and coordinate the different levels and the different actors, which is the European scale, regional scale, countries, and as well as research communities, which are often transnational, and also to enable non-commercial services to be accessed to the EOSC portal. Our general approach then is not that we aim to do everything. We don't have the resources, don't have the mandate to do this. But since there is a number of activities, EOSC, as Annabelle was pointing out in the beginning, has a number of projects and activities, and most of them are focused on very specific topics. So let's let them do their work, because they have for sure they will do that much better than we could do. And let's try and interact with all the actors to ensure that what comes out collectively is in line with EOSC-Pillar expectations, but I mean, I would say not just EOSC-Pillar expectations, but researchers' expectations and needs. And while doing this, we don't want to interact on a specific point only, but we aim to promote the underlying philosophy that national initiatives are the key elements to EOSC. This, of course, has consequences in several aspects. For example, if things do not happen at just one level, at the European level, it's not the EOSC is the portal made in Brussels, of course. So this was the message that Owen very effectively gave, that it's not something which is decided in a place, okay, but it's a collective effort. So this means that there needs to be some exchange between the different levels, and maybe some authority has to be handed over to the lower levels and so on. So coming to today's topics, I will briefly talk about three things. One is the onboarding of services, one is the prototype of National Service Registry, and our contribution to mobilize the community of portal developers and users. So let's start with onboarding services. This happens in our web package 7. And given our philosophy, which I expressed before, the aim of EOSC-Pillar is not that at the end of the project, we don't just want to have, let's say, 5 additional services available through a portal. It's not our final goal. I mean, having a service on the portal is relevant to us, of course, but it just is not the end of the story. So we want to evaluate what's there among the community of our partners initially, analyze them, and I possibly identify gaps which needs to be addressed, provide help with both on the technical side and on the side of the procedures to address these gaps, and then onboard to a portal. But then what we really aim to do is to see what happens along the full life cycle of the service. So we want to onboard services not at the very last day of the project lifetime, but let's say at least 1 year before the end, so that we can see what happens after that. We are talking here about services which are transnational and or trans-community. So they are complex things composed of different pieces. Maybe something was developed in a research community and used in a totally different environment, and then put together with some other pieces from somewhere else. So what happens when you need to update the service? Who has the responsibility for this? So we need to solve these kind of issues in a reasonable way, so that the services can be onboarded to a portal and be there to last. Okay, so what kind of services I'm talking about? So we identify some we call internally ready to use or generic services like GPU computing or cloud resources or Galaxy instances. And then the services relevant at the national or thematic level in the countries that we serve, of course. And there is an ongoing survey for this, which is gathering information. We identified 9 use cases among our project partners. These are services which are not developed from scratch. They already have a history behind. They are already at beta level, and they are naturally, I would say, they are born as trans-community and or transnational. And then we have other services which will be identified via the open call, which is actually just closed, where applications are being selected and activities will start June and July. And the approach to the open call is that what we learn in the first 3 bullet points in the slides, whatever we learn, we want to spend to effectively and quickly bring other services up to the portal. We'll now move to the National Service Registry. We are developing a prototype, which is based on a EOSC profile, and of course will be kept up to date with whatever comes out of EOSC and the EOSC future. One instance of it, this prototype will be developed as a National Service Registry for the Italian community. And again, we believe that this is a strong element, this is very important element. It was already said before that it makes a lot of sense to have something also at the national level, because national initiatives are closer to the research communities. There may be some research which is not yet ready, or for which there is no willing to go right away at the European level. Yet it would be useful to have it come to surface in a registry, possibly because of recognition of the work, which is one thing, also important. And the second is that the sooner it comes to surface, the sooner others will see that piece of service and maybe come up with new ideas or identify common points, common sub-services. So the whole ecosystem will benefit from this. Of course, this implies some mechanism of devolution. And if I am a service provider, I don't want to register my service once today in the Italian registry, and then in 2 years from now, when I feel ready, I don't want to repeat the whole procedure from scratch, as Owen was pointing out. So there needs to be mechanisms in place which involve also a quite high level of trust between all the actors involved. Very briefly, this is how the registry looks like. It will be presented internally at our midterm review happening in less than 1 month from now. It is based on D4 Science technology, which provides all the additional benefits of a collaborative environment for sharing information, pushing notifications, sharing files, and so on. Then last point I want to touch is workshop. As it was said, having a national catalog is not an original idea of EOSC-Pillar, but thematic and national catalogs are being developed in a few EOSC projects and maybe before EOSC was a reality. So we believe it's important that all of these catalogs have some level of interoperability with the EOSC 1, which means that we need to talk to each other, to interact with the two leading networks. It was EOSC before, now it is EOSC and EOSC Future. So we are organizing a workshop incorporating national thematic service and resource catalogs into the EOSC with the goal of sitting together and align our activities. It will be a half-day event. There will be some short presentations, followed by at least a couple of hours of discussions for technical and policy aspects. And the main outcome of this will be to draw a simple roadmap and timeline with milestones so that we can all reach the ultimate goal of ensuring that catalogs talk to each other and can interoperate. It will take place on the 21st of June. The date has just been set and it will be announced shortly. It will be a 3-hour event from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. And I think I am done with my slides with 15 seconds extra time, sorry.
Thank you very much, Fulvio. That was great.
I'm conscious we're nearly half an hour over, so we probably should wrap it up. But thank you again to all the speakers. Thanks to Léonie for coordinating this, and all of you for the contributions. Hopefully it's been very useful. It has been recorded as usual, so we'll make that available if you want to pass it on to colleagues. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you at future Infoshares and also the 2 upcoming events we've got in this kind of EOSC and Open Science team. So there's the coordination meeting coming up, I think on the 2nd of June from recollection. And then we have in July, another Infoshare on case studies of open science, good practice. So thank you all very much and see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.